Man comes face to face with big reindeer. Nobody expected this to happen next. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. The road through the park was quiet that afternoon. Crisp leaves rustled underfoot, and golden trees lined both sides like guardians of the silence. Mark had wandered farther than usual on his walk, letting his thoughts drift. He hadn't planned to go this deep into the reserve, but somehow it felt right today. He wasn't lost. Not really. He knew these paths well, from the months he'd spent here every fall. The cottage he rented each October sat nestled just outside town, a quiet haven from the city's grind. A place to rest, to breathe, to listen to something besides emails, deadlines, and endless noise. A gentle wind carried the scent of damp bark and decaying leaves. Mark found it soothing. He kept his hands in his jacket pockets and walked slowly, not rushing anywhere. He hadn't seen another person for over an hour, which suited him. It gave him space to think or not think at all. He had his camera with him. Old habit. Mark liked to shoot nature photos, especially when the world felt too heavy. Lately, it had felt heavier than usual. He stopped near a clearing and aimed at a line of trees painted orange and amber by the season. He clicked, checked the frame, then sighed. As he lowered the camera, something moved at the edge of the trees. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, or maybe a large dog. But then it stepped forward, tall, cautious, majestic. A reindeer, massive and still, with antlers like sprawling branches reaching to the sky. Mark froze. The animal looked directly at him, its breath puffing into the air. It wasn't frightened, not yet, and surprisingly, neither was he. There was a calm that settled between them, as if both understood that this moment was delicate, important. He slowly crouched to the ground, not breaking eye contact. The reindeer took a step closer, hooves silent on the damp road. Mark barely breathed. He could see the texture of its fur, now thick, earth-toned, almost shimmering in the soft light. Its eyes, wide and intelligent, studied him with quiet curiosity. It seemed unafraid of his presence. Gently, Mark raised his camera again and snapped a photo. The shutter click broke the silence, but the reindeer didn't flinch. Instead, it tilted its head, ears flicking forward. Mark lowered the camera, smiled faintly, and whispered, "You're not what I expected today." The reindeer took another step toward him. He sat down fully now, legs crossed, elbows resting on his knees. The reindeer stood just a few feet away. It lowered its head slightly, not in threat, but as if inspecting this strange human creature sitting on the pavement. Mark reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a granola bar. He opened it slowly, quietly, and held it in his palm. The reindeer sniffed the air but didn't move closer. Mark placed the food on the ground and slid it forward. The reindeer looked down, then back at Mark. Still, it didn't step away. Its presence felt grounding, as if time had paused. Mark sat still, letting the moment stretch. A single leaf drifted between them, fluttering to the road. The reindeer shifted its weight, watching. Then, carefully, it stepped forward again. This time, so close that Mark could hear its breath. He dared not move, barely blinked. It was peaceful, surreal in its simplicity. He studied its antlers, massive yet elegant. One had a small chip at the end. Its coat bore a few scars. This wasn't a young animal. It had seen seasons pass, survived them. Mark felt something stir inside a quiet ache, not painful, but persistent, like remembering something important you'd forgotten. The reindeer reached the granola bar, sniffed it, then gently picked it up and chewed. Mark watched, smiling despite himself. He couldn't remember the last time he had smiled without effort, the kind that wasn't for someone else's comfort, but simply because something felt quietly beautiful. The animal didn't linger long. Once it finished eating, it stood straight again, glanced down the road, then back at Mark. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then the reindeer did something strange. It leaned its head forward and touched its nose to Mark's forehead light, intentional. Mark's breath caught. It wasn't fear, it was something deeper, more vulnerable. The touch was fleeting, a gesture so unexpectedly intimate it left him stunned. Then, as if nothing had happened, The reindeer turned and began walking down the road, each step deliberate, disappearing slowly into the trees. He didn't move right away. He sat there, still stunned, watching the creature go. The road felt emptier now, quieter, but not lonely. Something had passed between them, something wordless. Mark stood, finally, brushing off his jeans, and looked back toward the town. He turned and began walking home. On the way back, the wind picked up slightly. Leaves danced across the pavement. Mark walked slower than before, but with a strange sense of clarity. Something had shifted in him. He didn't fully understand it, but he didn't need to. He just knew he felt different, lighter somehow. The cottage came into view through the trees. Smoke curled from the chimney. He stepped inside and removed his coat. He poured tea, sat by the window, and looked at the photo he'd taken. The reindeer stood, framed by autumn light. But it wasn't the photo that made him pause. It was the memory, the quiet connection. He ran a hand over his face, still feeling the echo of that brief contact. He hadn't realized how much he missed being touched not just physically, but emotionally. The past year had been harder than he'd admitted, even to himself. He hadn't told many people what happened, how his brother Eric had died last November, just before the holidays, how grief had made everything feel muffled, how he'd come back here hoping, maybe foolishly, to feel something again, anything. He hadn't expected a reindeer to be the one to break through. Eric had loved animals, used to volunteer at wildlife centers. He'd always said animals had a way of seeing us when we couldn't see ourselves. Mark never quite understood that until now, until that quiet, steady gaze met his own, until something wild reached across the space between them. Tears welled unexpectedly. He let them fall, quietly, without resistance. Not from sadness exactly, from recognition, from grace. He felt Eric in that moment, not in a ghostly way, but in the memory of how he made others feel. Present, seen, loved. Maybe, just maybe, he had sent a reminder. Not all healing comes from people. Not all comfort speaks in words. Sometimes it's found in the stillness of a forest road, in the warmth of breath on a cool afternoon, in the gaze of a reindeer who stayed just long enough to matter, long enough to help you remember. Mark looked out the window. The trees swayed gently in the breeze. He reached for his notebook and began to write. Not about grief, not yet. Just about a walk, a quiet meeting, and the moment something changed. One paragraph at a time, one breath, one step, one page. And somewhere, just beyond the tree line, a large reindeer stood still for a while as if it too had been changed by the meeting, as if some silent exchange had gone both ways. Then it turned and walked deeper into the woods, antlers swaying like branches in the wind.